Great, welcome everyone to Senate Education on this Tuesday, March 19th, 1:17. Couple priorities for the day, S220, an amendment to S220, floor amendment, that'll be sponsored by Senator Gulick and others. We're gonna work on that, and we're gonna work on an amendment to S284, and that related to the use of electronic devices, digital and online products in schools. And Ms. St. James will be back at 2 o'clock to walk us through that. So for now, I've asked Ms. St. James to just remind us what Senator Gulick's, as a lead sponsor, what her amendment is doing.
Sure, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. So the amendment that you all are considering to S220 would add a section at the very end that would be applicable only to school libraries. And it would require each public school board and each approved independent school to develop, adopt, ensure the enforcement of, and then make available publicly a library material selection policy and procedures for the reconsideration materials. And then the amendment is very specific on what that selection policy and those procedures can or cannot consider. So the policy and procedures have to affirm the importance of intellectual freedom and be guided by several things. The first is the First Amendment to the US Constitution. The second is the American Library Association's Library Bill of Rights and Freedom to Read Statement. And the third is Vermont's Freedom to Read Statement. Okay. Then the selection policy and procedures are required to prohibit the removal of school library material for several reasons. So a prohibition on prohibition, right? The first reason that the policy has to say you cannot exclude something from the school library collection based on these following reasons. The first reason is partisan approval or disapproval. The second is the author's race, nationality, gender identity, sexual orientation, political views, or religious views. The third is school board members or members of the public's comfort, personal morality, political views, or religious views. The fourth is the author's point of view concerning the problems and issues of our time, whether international, national, or local. Fifth, the race, nationality, gender identity, sexual orientation, political views, or religious views of the protagonist or other characters. And then the sixth item is content related to sexual health that addresses physical, mental, emotional, or social dimensions of human sexuality, including puberty, sex, and relationships. And then reiterating kind of what policy and procedures are meant to do. The first thing is that it's required to ensure that it's certified school library staff that are responsible for curating and developing the collections. And that those collections need to provide students with a wide array of materials that are relevant to students' research, independent reading interests, and educational needs, as well as ensuring that such materials are tailored to the cognitive and emotional levels of the children served by the school.
I just actually have a couple questions for Ledge Council. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. I have received, or I've heard a few things that I wanted to see if you could address for us. One being that in section 17A selection policy, apparently the American Library Association is a nonprofit, and there is a sense that tagging or referring to a nonprofit in this way might not be a great idea in terms of putting it in statute, because they can come and go. Do you have an opinion, or would you like to speak to the American Library Association?
So I would say that's a policy decision. So it's not illegal to cite to I'm struggling to come up with like the most inclusive term, but an organization that is outside of the government that has policy statements that you are kind of adopting. That's not illegal to cite to that, but you are absolutely correct. If we're putting this language in statute. So if 5 years from now, the American Library Association's Library Bill of Rights and Freedom to Read statement is at odds with Vermont's beliefs, or even just the plain language of the statute, then that would certainly be a conflict that someone would need to be paying attention to rectify. Right?
Right.
It's not gonna fix itself.
Mhm.
So I think it's a policy decision, but you point out a very practical concern.
What do you think, Senator?
I guess, I mean, the American Library Association has been around for maybe 8 years.
I could go either way, keeping it or not, it's.
I mean, I know as a school librarian, it was an organization that was very helpful to us in so many ways that we were very much connected to, so I'm fine keeping it in there. I had another question though.
Okay.
While we look up at the age of the American Library Association.
I'm looking that up,
Okay, great.
1876.
Okay, so it's not your average run-of-the-mill nonprofit that is.
And it could change its mission and maybe shift, but you could always change, pull that out at some point too.
Right. And then the other question that was brought up was, around, subdivision, no, subsection C, at the end of the amendment, the certified school library staff. I know that in our bifurcated system, we do have some schools that don't require certification, so would you recommend that we sort of expand on that language to cover all schools, or?
So I, the term certified is not really a term that we would use when we're talking about the licensure of school, like under the Professional Standards Board, right? Those are endorsements or licenses. So I believe the term certified is meant to include everyone who's working in a school, regardless of whether they're licensed by the Standards Board, as more of a generic term indicating that the library, that there might be a certification for library staff out there. But I have not done any research on what that is, nor have I been privy to any testimony. So you could certainly amend that in any way.
Could we just say this section shall ensure that school library staff are responsible?
You could. I think the purpose behind this, and again, this is your bill
Yeah.
and you breathe intent into this, right? It's not it would be inappropriate for me to try and convince you what the intent is here, but my understanding of the purpose of this is to make sure that it's library staff that are appropriately credentialed, trained, licensed, right? And it's not someone from the school board who's just plunked into the library and thereby becoming a library staff member who then has control over curating these collections, right?
Yeah.
It's now that the school board or the board of trustees may be hiring those folks, so it might be a negligible difference, right? But I think if your goal is to ensure that there's some sort of assurance that the library staff are trained and qualified in some way to be making those decisions, then maybe that's something you want to take some testimony on the right verbiage to use there. If you just want to get rid of the word certified and just have school library staff, I also think that's fine too. It just depends on what your goal is here.
Would it be weird to say train library staff?
Can we ask Rebecca
Yeah.
what the intent was, maybe,
Yeah,
or you have to identify yourself?
Hi, Rebecca Sofferman, the co-president of the Vermont School Library Association. I think the intent was exactly as she said, was that we don't want, we want people who have at least some amount of training to be making the decisions on collection development and to be overseeing the collection so that there is, to make sure that the collection is appropriate for the age level that they're that the books are in, and that they are being regularly looked at and weeded out if there are things that are no longer appropriate. Those are the things that we do. So, I do understand that in independent schools, you know, you're saying that they don't necessarily require the, like a master's degree.
Right.
Like, you know, but even our school librarians don't either, so I think that you could use, even the word, qualified is better, you know, I think, than just trained. Cause anybody can be trained, I think. You could stick somebody in there and train them in there.
Right, what's the definition of training, right?
Yeah.
5-hour course, if, yeah.
I understand that maybe putting some language in there that could be a little bit broader so that it covers somebody who is still in the because like in our schools, we have people that are in the process of getting licensed that are already working in libraries. But they are, you know, already have some sort of qualifications and they're in the process of being licensed, so we want to make sure they are covered too.
And may I ask, how would you define certified in this context? Well, let me start with you, if you don't mind, sorry. And we'll-
It's fine.
Can I let her answer that first? Because she may have, like, I feel like she has.
Okay, sure.
My understanding is that the Agency of Education reviews transcripts of school librarians, and please correct me if this sounds wrong too, but that they look at the coursework of a school librarian. There is a program at UVM that's a certificate program in school librarianship. I think it's 6 courses that are
Okay.
required for completion. That qualifies, probably my certification I have a master's degree in school media from Rutgers University. I would imagine that might qualify me for certification. They have to review the person's transcript and then they do issue a certificate. So that word certified does have a specific meaning in the school library setting, I believe.
Right, and like I was saying, that there are people who are currently working in libraries that have provisional licenses. So they've had a certain amount of, you know, that they have a certain amount of qualifications, but maybe they are in that UVM sequence, which is six classes. I do teach in that I teach a course in that sequence. And they may not be all the way through it yet. We do have, even in even in public school libraries in the state, people who are working towards their certification, but they have to be getting that training and they are in the process of getting all of that training. And they can have a certain amount, they can just walk off the street and even as a provisional license, they're not able to just walk off the street, they have to have some.
Yeah, I get what you're getting
as well.
at, for sure. I mean, you're going through, you're curating
Yeah.
books, you know, or collections, all that kind of thing. Are we negatively impacting anybody that happens to be school librarian, hired in 1970, because he or she was just an absolute rock star as a human being? They've learned the ropes, and now is this in any way negatively impacting them? Because they're not certified, they've never taken a class, they're just, you know, we all know these folks.
Well, I mean, there are
They're in our
definitely,
communities.
I mean, I agree with what Catherine said, there are multiple pathways to be
Okay.
certified, so it doesn't mean they have to have a master's degree or they have to have a specific, there's different pathways to get there.
Could they get there just through their experience? Hired in 1970, this is now X number of years later.
Yeah, like you could have been a teacher, classroom teacher.
Yeah.
That's been working since,
Right.
you know,
In a library.
yeah, or even in a classroom and then they get moved into the library. But if that happens, they have to they'll be on a provisional license for the library. And then they would have to get, you know,
You could also do.
but I think there's peer review, there's also peer review,
Okay.
so you're right.
My question is, are we hurting anybody?
I
Hired in
don't think so.
1970.
I personally don't think
Well,
so.
No, but the question still comes down to approved independent schools not needing to have a certified school library staff member. So how do we thread that needle?
I don't have an easy answer for you. Unfortunately, I need to go to another
Yeah.
committee, but I will be back at 2.
Great.
I will just say, I just took a very brief look at the standards board's rules, and I don't see the term certification or certified defined.
So you could be in an independent school, still certified, and you have the experience to be there. We're not putting
Usually
something on
when-
the standard.
Usually when we're talking about certification
Yep.
in a licensure capacity, it's
Yep.
either by a state agency or some sort of other governing body, right? Like, you have a certification in some specialty in nursing. Issued by the American Nursing Association. That does not affect your licensure and your scope of practice for nursing licensure in the state of Vermont. But you could say that you have this certification from some national organization. I don't know that we've had any testimony on library personnel outside of the Professional Standards Board licensure and endorsement process. Specifically in approved independent schools, and what are the qualifications they're looking for? I'm not sure that I can weigh in on that. You could say something like ensure that shall ensure that appropriately licensed or credentialed, but even then, if you're not licensed or credentialed in the approved independent school.
Love for this just to get, Peter can fix it, I think. No,
Oh, I
when it
mean-
goes, but
I mean, I was gonna say, why not just have. Ensure that school library staff. Because whoever is there has been chosen by their, they've been hired by their superintendent, right? And they've been approved by their school board. And if they're not licensed, they should be working toward licensure. And I don't know, I don't see why we have to be weighing into the credentials of the library staff in this particular amendment.
I agree 100% with Senator Gulick. The House can fix it if it's a problem, frankly. I mean, it's,
I guess my only concern would be the scenario that you had mentioned in the beginning is
Yeah.
somebody has an agenda or whatever it is, whatever for the reason, it doesn't even have to be an agenda. And they put somebody in that, the school puts somebody in that position purposefully.
But I just don't
That's
think
not-
that's what this amendment is, that's not really the target of this amendment, and that might be work we can do next year. To flesh out licensure of libraries. But I don't think
you can
it's.
go. I feel for you. Thanks.
Thanks,
We'll
yeah,
see you
we'll be back
we'll
in
see you
two.
at 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a million.
We'll be here.
Ish.
Yeah.
So I'll state for the record,
Oh.
ish.
You don't have?
Yeah, ish.
So as I've said, we're beyond the 11th hour. It's midnight almost. And so this is looking really good to me personally with Senator Gulick's change. So anything that you would like to add?
Absolutely. Catherine Delmeo, I'm the state librarian and the commissioner of the Department of Libraries. I appreciate you reaching out to me about the possibility of amending S-220 and act related to Vermont's public libraries. Just quickly, I was doing some librarianing as we were talking, and I'd like to share a couple of pieces of information. I'm looking right now at the education, the AOE transcript review worksheet. And it looks like this is endorsement number 61. That seems to be the official term that they're using for it. I think we refer to it as a certificate, but it does look like it's an endorsement. AOE would of course be the best people to talk to about that. Just to answer a question,
I'm completely lost, I'm not sure what that's.
the certificate of the school librarians. It's
Okay, so
actually
you're
an
referring
endorsement.
back to.
I'm referring back to that. Yeah, so I'm just gonna say a couple things before I get started, just information points that arose in your questions and
Okay.
then share my testimony.
Okay.
With regards to the American Library Association, of which I've been a member for many years, it's a long established association. The department perspective about the changes to the American Library Association's Bill of Rights come from the knowledge that the Bill of Rights was adopted by the American Library Association in 1939. It has been amended in 1948, 1961, 1967, 1980, and 2019. There is something in the Bill of Rights that many librarians may believe that in conceptually, but very few libraries, including no school libraries in the state, actually follow policy. All people, it's number 7 of the ALA's Bill of Rights. All people, regardless of origin, age, background, or views, possess a right to privacy and confidentiality in their library use. In this room previously, the topic of 12 years came up. I think that there are very few schools that could comply with FERPA and also comply with number 7. That's one of the reasons that I think it might be a mistake to include reference to the American Library Association in this language, because there would be a conflict there, right there around the age.
Say it again, they're 7.
Let me read it to you, so I'm
That
sure.
should have been after the Gulf War, wasn't it?
It doesn't say
Was
that.
that the Patriots Act that put that in there?
I'm not sure, but on their
pretty sure.
website, it says that the inclusion of age was reaffirmed January 23rd, 1996. So I just jotted this down and I don't want to spend time looking at it, but my note says all people regardless of origin, age, background, or views possess a right to privacy and confidentiality in their library use. So a child of 3 years of age, toddler picks up a book, they have a library card, they check out the card. The parent in a school setting has access to that card through the age of 18. That's my understanding for FERPA. In a public library, that's different, but it's typically decided by the public library within the scope of state law if there is any age list. So I think that there is actually a conflict with the American Library's ALA Bill of Rights.
Okay.
So I'm gonna take it from the top of my testimony. This is the version of it that was revised on March 17th. The Department of Libraries strongly supports the statutory requirement that all school libraries in Vermont adopt policies for the selection and reconsideration of library materials. These policies support school library staff and school administrators in developing and maintaining collections of materials for their students and in responding to any challenges that arise around the inclusion of specific materials in those school library collections. To the extent possible, the department recommends the alignment of language and statute about selection and reconsideration policies in school libraries, public libraries, and even the department's own collection at the State Library and the Able Library. I thought that there had been, I'll summarize this next part. I thought that there had been consensus between the Vermont School Library Association and the department after a conversation that I had with one of the co-presidents, Mr. Gabritz, over the weekend on Friday. I had drafted some initial remarks based on that. I was recommending, the department was recommending that we use the language that I believe Senator Williams and Senator Weeks had developed for the Department of Libraries in this school library section, because it seemed concise, it seemed to be supported by many people in this committee, and it seemed like good language to me. That language was, shall adopt a collection development policy that reflects Vermont's diverse people and history, including diversity of race, ethnicity, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability status, religion, and political beliefs. So it covers a lot of the same ground with fewer words and in alignment with the other language in the department's collection development policy. I also realized there was a bit of an oversight on my part that I should have also recommended we include that in the public library policy. So you can see that I've made a couple of possible edits here. But that said, the language we have right now for the Department of Libraries is sufficient. The language we have right now in the bill for the department and public libraries are both sufficient. We don't need to make those changes, but if you're touching it anyway, you may wish to. I want to point out to folks that the working group did not make a recommendation on this topic. It was something that was discussed. We specifically did not recommend it because of the complexity of doing so in the context of Vermont's mixed delivery school environment. The issue of the public schools and this language is fairly straightforward. The matter of how this language would be implemented or could impact or could have potential consequences for an independent school in Vermont, an approved independent school. I am not actually clear on, I'm not expert in, but I think that there may be schools that have religious beliefs that are in conflict with some of the language in this proposal. And that could open up the state to some liability. That would be a question probably for somebody else from AOE or the Ledge Council. But I do think that this does require more careful consideration and input from stakeholders, and we don't have very much time for that right now.
Yes, Senator Taylor.
So my understanding is anyone can propose an amendment at any time. So I'm not beholden to any particular body to make an amendment. So, I mean, I just want to make that clear. That said, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I would be fine getting rid of the library bill of rights.
Yeah,
Take that out.
Yeah.
And then taking the word certified out.
Yeah.
To your point about conflict with a religious school, I guess I'm not quite sure what to do with that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, we're moving. Yeah, if you're getting approved, if you're getting funds. I think this is right in line with access to public dollars, frankly, given what's in the 2200 series. So.
Yeah, I'm
do
not expert in that at all. I
Yeah,
just
so-
flag it for you because I could
I
imagine.
see no concern
challenge there.
at all right now with that personally, if that. Yeah,
Yeah, that's.
so I think the two changes, yeah, the Bill of Rights thing. And then the other piece, and then people can have their piece on the House side, and I'm sure it'll end up in a committee conference. And keep fading these things.
Yeah, from the department's perspective, having consistent language across the three sections to the
Yeah.
degree possible would be a good thing to do. There would be some consistency. The challenge right now is really, and I can speak to this more when it's in the House, and I can study more about the impacts for the independent schools. And
Yeah, we've got, I mean, we have to frankly move on, honestly,
Yeah.
we don't have.
I do think there is one aspect of this that I do feel like I need to say to you all, which is that S220 was moving very nicely through the processes. There was a lot of consensus, even the senators who didn't vote for S220 did say they felt like there was something good about the bill.
Mhm.
I'm concerned because I've been observing this session that there's sometimes a challenge when we have the topic of independent approved schools and public schools. And I do have a concern that S220 might not pass and all of the work of the working group might get bogged down in this topic. There's a lot of good in the bill right now, and I think that it might be a good idea to attach this language to an education bill since it applies to a different chapter entirely than S220 does. S220 is about chapter 22. I just really am concerned that after all of the work that people have put toward the working group and this legislation, that something could happen where it becomes more of a conflict.
What would happen is they would vote down the amendment to maybe still vote for the bill.
Well, it's helpful to
as
hear that. This is my first, I'm
Yeah.
going to be frank, this is my first rodeo bringing a bill
yeah.
through this, like working
Yeah.
with you all as you bring a
Yeah.
bill.
And I think the amendment will pass,
Mhm.
I do, my gut is that it'll leave the Senate with a lot of, the whole bill will leave the Senate with a lot of support, it's consistent, I think, with other legislative initiatives and rulemaking that the state board and others have put forth. I could be wrong,
Okay, I just felt I should say that because I know that our department's put a lot of work into supporting the working group, and I know that so many people
I
have been
appreciate that,
involved in
yeah.
that. So
Thank you.
I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
So, do you wanna add anything, or are we good? Because you know what we're gonna do, I don't think we're gonna change anything else.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I would say is maybe keep the word qualified if you don't like certified, to have something in there, but
I think you should even do it on the House side, is my
Yeah.
gut, honestly. You know,
Yeah, because, sorry, I know we wanna wrap this up, but
Yeah.
there's nothing in that subsection C that is requiring a school to have a licensed or school librarian. So all this is saying is the policy and procedures required under subsection A of this section shall ensure that the staff be responsible for, so whoever's in that position will be doing the work.
we hope so, yeah.
Yeah, and if they're not, then they shouldn't be there in the first place, right? And that's like a whole other bill,
Right.
potentially.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't think this is where we should address that, because I think I know what you're getting at, but I don't think this is where we should address that problem.
Shabila, do you mind working with Ledge Council to make those two changes?
I'd be happy to.
And why don't you, since you're gonna present on the floor.
Yeah.
Be the lead sponsor, I'm happy to have my name on it, anybody else want to have their name on it?
No, okay.
Where is this colleague?
I think he's still
Oh,
in,
still.
still debating
Okay.
folks and folks, but I think he'll probably be okay with it. Then maybe shop it around, but I think you'll wanna come back. Let's take a vote on it today.
Okay.
So that would be great.
Okay.
Okay,
You want me to,
we have 10 minutes now before Beth comes back.
yes.
Maybe email her, and make those changes and we'll take a vote later today on this. And if we can't take a vote later today, we'll do the whole library bill on the floor tomorrow. And we'll just do it before third reading, but I think we'll be